The following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell, coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. And we're coming to you tonight on the Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, the X Zone Broadcast Network, and on Channel 32 on Simul TV, which is the X Zone TV channel. My guest this hour is Dr. William L. Wagner. And we've had the pleasure of having Dr. Wagner on the show a couple of times. A very interesting and a very gracious person. So joining me now is Dr. William Wagner. And Bill, welcome back to the X Zone. Great seeing you, my friend.
Thank you, Rob. Looking forward very much to being with you.
Bill, you just came back from, I understand, the World Evangelical Alliance, and the title of the conference was The Future of the Gospel. 25 leaders from 80 countries. Tell us about it.
Right, there are 225 leaders from 80 countries. It was a meeting of the World Evangelical Alliance. They have about 600 million Christians around the world. They have work in about 128 different countries. It's quite an interesting group. Mm-hmm. But we're very concerned about the future of Christianity, trying to figure out what is going to be happening. We're convinced, Rob, that there is a war against Christianity, particularly in the West. And in the West, Christianity is decreasing in size. In what they call the majority world, it is increasing quite rapidly in size. So we're trying to take all these things into effect, and we're trying to say, what can we as Christians do to present a more positive picture of who we are as Christians?
What were some of the solutions or ideas that were proposed during this conference?
Well, I did some study one time, and I was trying to find out why some groups were growing and some were not. So I studied the Southern Baptists, the Assemblies of God, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons, the Muslims, the homosexuals, and I decided to find out why they were growing.
Right.
And I discovered that the Muslims have their strategy at three levels. It's a micro, and a meta, and a macro. Micro is working with individuals, meta is institutions, and the macro is changing society. And three of those work at the macro level: the Mormons, the Muslims, and the homosexuals. Evangelical Christians do not work at the macro level, and we're trying to work at the macro level at this point.
How come the homosexuals are placed in the same category as a religious philosophy?
Because it's not only a religion that I was interested in, but I was interested in any type of a group that was having an effect upon the whole society and changing the society. And since 1990, the homosexuals have changed the Western society.
Okay, but what about the LGBTQ? Why are we just focusing on homosexuals here? It kind of sounds, if you'll excuse the expression, Bill, sexist and racist.
Well, no, I think that I do say the whole LGBTQ group. I do include that in there. Mm-hmm. When I did the book, I was just using the term homosexuals, but you're absolutely right. That term has changed.
Yeah. Why do you think that Christianity is falling? Is it because Christianity hasn't kept up with the times and it's still clinging to the older times? Is it because they're not modernizing? Why do you think that the numbers are decreasing? Like, I'm a Christian and I'm surprised to hear that.
Well, I think the main reason is because we're not thinking like we should. We're not thinking as we ought to. That's why I'm saying let's study what these other groups are doing and why they are so successful. But there is very definitely a war against Christianity. Several books have been written, several people are talking about it, and I guarantee you that Christianity now is on the defensive.
Who's attacking us, Bill?
Secularism. the LGBTQ group. There was a book that was written by them called After the Ball, and they said, we're going to change American society. And those that are looking down upon us and persecuting us now, we will make them the victims of our wrath, and we will look down upon them in the future. And they named number one the Christians. And so there is a lot of opposition to Christianity.
The minister at my church, Anglican church, is lesbian. How can we say that? Why would they attack? You know, like, why don't they attack the Jews? Why don't they attack the Muslims? Why Christians?
Well, I think that the main reason, this book, you ought to try and get it, and other people should get it, entitled After the Ball. 2 Harvard professors wrote it, and they said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to change the society. They had to have an enemy. You always have to have an enemy.
Yeah.
And so the enemy was Christianity.
Not,
and they've been successful.
Not Islam, but Christianity.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Last I heard, Christians didn't fly planes into buildings, killing 3,000 people in one day in a terrorist attack. So why they're picking on Christians is beyond me. What do you think about what's going on in Israel right now, Bill? We have Israel, a very small country. I think it's 290 miles wide by 80, or is it? No, it's 290 north to south and 85 miles east to west. We're talking about a very small country here. And yet it seems that there doesn't, a year doesn't go by without a war. Why are they picking on Israel?
Well, that's a very, very long history. I've been to Israel probably about 60 times. We used to have a Baptist hospital in Gaza, and a Baptist medical school in Gaza, and I've been there many times working with them on that. But there has always been a lot of hatred by the Palestinians towards the Jews. One thing about the Middle East, Rob, you've got to remember, they do not forget, they do not forgive. That is a trait of the Middle Easterner, and it's a trait of the Palestinians, it's a trait of the Jews, too, at this point.
But when we look at the Gaza Strip, it's considered a, what are they calling it now? Just give me a sec here. I've got it in my notes. Oh, my gosh. The world's largest open-air prison. 2 million people live in that little area. They're boxed in, surrounded by cement. They can't leave unless there's a serious medical emergency. And I thought that the United Nations was trying to get them to split the Gaza Strip, half Palestinian, half Israel. Whatever happened to that?
Well, what happened, the Gaza Strip was actually created after the Six-Day War, when all the Palestinians that were in the part that now is Israel, they left. And it became one large refugee camp. And it was a refugee camp. Now, the interesting thing about it is, the other Arab countries would not be willing to take them in as refugees into their country. The reason is because they said, we're going to leave the Palestinians in Gaza as a sore point to the Jews in the future, so that they would be the stepping stone to defeat Israel in the future. So they very consciously kept Gaza as it is, and it is a prison camp. They can't get out.
Wow. Why the animosity towards Israel and the Jews, Bill? Jesus was a Jew.
Yeah,
Moses was a Jew.
Well, I don't know. They say that brothers always fight more than anybody else. And in reality, Ishmael was a brother of one of the patriarchs. And so they were brothers, and so they still are fighting together. I'm not entirely sure. Now, if I was going to be putting on my theological hat, I would say that God has always predicted this, and predicted that the chosen people, which are the Jews, would be persecuted. But I think that they also said that they would return to the land of Israel. So I think that there is a God-given reason for everything that's happening today.
So would this indicate the end of the times, the apocalypse, and the second coming of Christ?
The last time I was with you, Rob, you said, when do you think Jesus is going to come back? And I said, many people keep saying, it's coming soon, it's coming soon. And I said, I don't really believe that. I think he's going to come sometime, but not really real soon. I've changed my mind. I don't know whether you realize or not, but the whole world could very rapidly change within the next week. This whole thing in the Middle East could spiral out of control, and it could very easily issue in the last days and the coming of Jesus Christ. And if it does spiral out of control, that is going to happen.
In your estimate, or in your opinion, President Biden going over to Israel, do you foresee any changes in what's going on between, the Jews and the Palestinians?
No. And the big question is not only the Palestinians and the Hezbollah up in Lebanon have already declared, we will destroy Israel. Iran, it says, we will destroy Israel. The question is whether any of these other countries are going to join in with them. But I believe that what's going to happen is there's going to be a very strong force against Israel in the days to come. One thing you need to look at, Rob, look at the Temple Mount.
Yeah.
And see what's happening at the Temple Mount. That's going to be a key for future events.
All right. For our listeners who aren't as versed in theological and biblical times, Bill, tell our listeners about the dome on the Temple Mount.
Okay, there is this area that's called the Temple Mount, and this is where David built his temple, where Solomon built the temple, and it is the holiest spot in the world for the Jews. And in the Bible says the day is going to come when the temple is going to be rebuilt. Now, the problem is that on the Temple Mount, you have two mosques. And the third most holy spot in Islam is Jerusalem, and is this spot. Now, you ask, why did this war begin? The war began because, let me get these notes, on September the 17th, Israeli settlers went up onto the Temple Mount, which is controlled by the Muslims, and because they went up there, they desecrated that, and Hamas said, the reason why we've attacked Israel is because they desecrated the Temple Mount. That's how it's serious they take this Temple Mount situation.
Okay, so if the Temple Mount is in Israel, in Jerusalem, what are the Muslims doing there?
Well, because they used to have it before the 6-Day War.
Ah.
And when the 6-Day War took place, Israel took it over, but they allowed the Temple Mount to continue to be in the hands of the Muslims, and the Jews took as their holy spot what they called the Wailing Wall, which was down on the side, and it was a part of the old temple built by Solomon. And so that was their holy spot. But many of the Jews say, we're going to take over rebuild our temple. There is now a group in Israel, if you ever go to their museum, they have all of the building materials ready, stored to rebuild the temple as soon as the Temple Mount is vacant of the mosque. And so something's going to happen. And I think that in this next war, one or both of those mosques are going to be destroyed, and that's going to be the beginning of the end.
Exonation, Dr. William L. Wagner is our guest. His website is williamlwagner.com. We'll both be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
Are you ready to dive into the mysteries of the unknown? Tune into the electrifying X-Zone radio TV show hosted by the one and only Rob McConnell.
I'm Rob McConnell, and get ready for a mind-bending journey through the unexplained phenomenon that surrounds us all. From UFO encounters to cryptids, ghosts, and everything in between, we've got it covered here in the X-Zone.
Rob McConnell, the seasoned investigator and renowned radio personality, brings you the most compelling interviews with top experts, authors, and experiencers from around the world. Each episode is an unforgettable exploration into the depths of the extraordinary.
That's right, Exo Nation. Join me every week as we open the door to the supernatural and explore the strange and amazing stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew.
And it's not just radio anymore. With our groundbreaking TV show, You can now witness the sessions unfold right before your eyes. From chilling reenactments to captivating visuals, prepare yourself for a multimedia experience like never before.
With a legacy spanning over 2 decades, the X-Zone Radio and TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, is your ultimate source for mind-blowing entertainment and thought-provoking discussions. Join our growing community of truth seekers as we continue to unlock the world's mysteries.
So, why wait? Step into the X-Zone and embark on a journey that will challenge your beliefs, ignite your curiosity, and keep you on the edge of your seat.
Remember, X-Zone Nation, the truth is out there, and it's waiting for you right here on the X-Zone Radio and TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell. Don't miss a minute of the action.
Tune in now on your favorite radio station or visit xzoneradiotv.com to join the adventure. The X-Zone Radio TV show with Rob McConnell, where reality meets the unknown.
The X-Zone Radio TV show, unraveling the secrets of the universe, one episode at a time. For more information, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com.
Come back, and for all the great programming on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit www.xzbn.net. Dr. William L. Wagner is my guest. www.williamlwagner.com is his website. Bill, something that really caught my attention with the letter you sent me earlier today was the amazing hidden 2% of the Bible. Bill, are you there?
I'm still here. I'm listening to you.
Okay. All right. So what is that about? What the Bible's amazing hidden 2%?
Well, I'm convinced, Rob, that the Bible is a book. It was never meant to be a scientific treatise. It was always intended to be a book to help people live here on this earth with one another, and also for us to serve God. But there's about 2% of the Bible where there are pictures into this greatness of God. And generally, these 2% of the Bible are things that are really interesting. When I first became a Christian, there was the various verses of Scripture that I ran into and I had some problems with. And I would go to a theologian and say, what's the answer? And they'd say, well, that's too complicated. You'll learn later on. And I found out that there were not any real good answers. And so I decided to say there must be an answer. One of the ones is creation, for instance. Mm-hmm. Most of the college students are leaving Christianity because they say, we cannot believe in the biblical explanation of creation. But I believe that there is a very good explanation for it called the gap theory, where God created the world by evolution, 35 billion years or whatever it is. Then it was destroyed because of a war in heaven. The Bible said there was a war in heaven. And then it was a recreation of the earth about the year 4,000, 5,000, doesn't make any difference when. And I believe there was an explanation for it. And when you look at the Bible, it says, but to me, the Bible doesn't go into depth to explain these things, but it just gives us a window looking into it.
Why don't you think the Bible doesn't give us the total explanation and just gives us the sliver of the information in the book of Genesis?
Because I think that God's saying there's a lot more. Though now we look through a glass darkly is what Paul wrote, but someday we're going to look face to face. And I think God gave us all that we needed to know to live on this earth, to be able to work with other people, and to serve Him. But He did give us these various small 2% that shows us that, such as the thing is that Paul went into the third heaven. Mm-hmm. If there's a third heaven, what about the first heaven and the second heaven?
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of those questions.
Wow. You were saying that a lot of university graduates are leaving the church because Christianity cannot be proved, or they can't. I'm sorry, not Christianity, but creationism cannot be understood. Why don't they believe? What's the issue here? These are probably people at one time who believed in the Easter Bunny, Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy. And yet when it comes to something that binds society together, they don't believe in it. So what does that tell us about their morals, their scruples?
Well, I think there is a secularism today that is very strong on scientific fact. And they will say we have to believe science. And all I'm saying is, yeah, you can believe science, and the Bible can go along with science if you really look at it and study it. I don't think that science and Christianity are opposed to each other, but many of those who accept science say science and Christianity are not compatible, therefore they leave Christianity.
Is it they leave Christianity because they cannot accept the word of the Bible, or is it because they are just being taught so much negativity in schools these days that, science and schools many times, they just don't want the Bible mentioned? For example, when I was in school, we said the Lord's Prayer every morning. When I was in school, the first class was scripture every morning. But now there's no Bibles in the school. There's no Lord's Prayer. There's no scripture classes. And I think the educational field has a lot to do with the falling of Christianity.
Well, you ask why it is that people are falling away. We have divided culture up into 12 different mountains. One of those mountains is education, and I'm supposedly a specialist on education. Christianity has lost the educational institutions in the United States today and in the Western world, beginning with kindergarten and all the way up to the PhD level. And we're going to have to reimagine Christian education and reimagine how we can once again bring back a balance so that people can have the option of understanding Christianity through the schools. Right now, Christianity is on the outs, particularly in the universities.
Well, as well as the elementary schools and the high schools here in Canada.
I just came from California, Marin County. Tell me about it.
Oh my gosh!
You guys in Marin County are about way out in the left field.
Is the rift between Catholicism and Christianity separating? Like I often wonder, what would Jesus say when he comes back and he looks at the Vatican and it's amassed treasures and all the property it owns, and it just boggles my mind. It's the richest corporation in the world.
It used to be when you and I both grew up, there was a great rift, as you said, between Catholics and Protestants. I was told that probably the devil was the Pope and the Antichrist, 666, and all that sort of thing. I think today, because there is this war against Christianity, it is bringing the Eastern Orthodox and the Catholics and the Protestants and the evangelicals much closer together. And we're having a greater tendency to accept one another. I have great relations with the people within the Roman Catholic Church. There's no problem at all with that.
Why? Maybe you can help me understand this. Why are there so many statues of different people that the Catholics pray to, light candles for? It makes no sense to me, because in the Bible it says you don't do that. And yet here you've got the Catholics, especially the Vatican, the center of Catholicism. It's filled with these statues.
I don't have an answer for you, because I don't know why they're doing it. There was this big battle way back during the Middle Ages between the Eastern Orthodox and the Catholics. And the Eastern Orthodox said, we are totally against statues and paintings of Christ. And they called it the iconoclastic debate. And the Catholics said, no, we're for it. And they split. The Eastern Church and the Western Church split primarily because of that. But however, you go into the Eastern Orthodox Church today, and they have their statues in there.
Really,
today.
Unbelievable. Bill, why is it that there are two books in the Bible instead of just one? Why is there the Old Testament and the New Testament, instead of just the Bible as one testament?
Well, I think the reason why is because it was progressive revelation, Rob. God presented himself to Adam and Eve. You know, God did not speak to anybody, as far as I know from the Bible, until Noah. And then God spoke to Noah. Then he didn't speak again until Abraham. And then Abraham, and then he began to speak to Joseph and to Moses. And you see a progression of God's revelation to man. And the ultimate revelation that God gave to man was in Jesus Christ. And I believe that then was the ultimate revelation, and that's why we have the start of Jesus Christ forward. And so I think that it's nothing. The Old Testament is nothing more than the time before Christ, and the New Testament nothing but the time after this ultimate revelation. And today we have everything we need that God has given to us so that we might be able to know God on this earth, and that's through Jesus Christ, his Son.
It seems like there's two gods. The God of the Old Testament, who is very vengeful. You know, he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. He destroyed the Egyptians following Moses, which brings up another point. If he is the father of everyone, he killed his own people. But that's for another show. The God of the New Testament is loving, forgiving. How come? What was the change? And is this why the Hebrews take the books of the Old Testament as the Torah and ignore the New Testament?
No, I still think it's just progressive revelation. I think that God went and, there are religious groups, particularly right after right when the very creation of Christianity, after Paul had died, there were religious groups that came along and said there are two gods, the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament. And this was preached and taught quite a bit in the early period of time. But I think today we just say it's the same God with a different revelation and with a progressive revelation. He revealed himself in a way to where man acted as man would act by killing their neighbors. But then within Christianity, we now have love through Jesus Christ.
Did God present himself to anyone beside Jesus in the New Testament?
Well, Jesus did in the form of God in the form of Jesus.
No, but I mean when we look at the Old Testament, you know, God presented himself as the burning bush to Moses. He presented himself when Moses went up the mountain and got the Ten Commandments. And there's other examples in the Old Testament where God presented himself to his prophets. And yet I can't remember or recall any in the New Testament besides Jesus Christ, which in my books is a pretty darn heavy representation. But it's how come?
Okay, that's a very interesting theological question, and I'm just answer it this way.
Sure.
You see, when a person becomes a Christian, a very strange thing happens. The Spirit of God comes and lives within their life. So it's no longer necessary for us to have a revelation from God from outside. We have God within us. And the Bible says the Spirit of God lives within us. So when you're talking about a revelation of God, I believe that God speaks to us through the Spirit that we have within us. But he doesn't speak to us from an exterior point of view, but from an interior point of view.
But why didn't he do that to the people in the New Testament? In the Old Testament, I mean.
But again, it was this idea that Jesus spoke with you. We don't have too many times where God spoke to anybody in the New Testament, possibly with Paul, but when he did speak to him, he spoke to him through the Spirit. And it was through the Spirit there was power. That's why the whole concept of the Spirit is extremely important in Christianity.
All right, for those who aren't Christians who are listening tonight, how do we explain to these people who are saying, what is the Spirit that these two are talking about? How would you explain that?
Well, I believe that in the Trinity and the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit, you see, what happened is that when Adam and Eve sinned, God created Adam and Eve and made them three things. He said, we created man in our own image. And the old Jews used to say the number for God was three, strangely enough, three. And the reason why, because God was Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so he created Adam and Eve and gave them body and soul and spirit. Then they sinned. And when they sinned, Satan says, you're going to die. And Satan said, but no, God said you're going to die. And Satan says, no, you're not. But they died. But what died was their spirit. And so a person who is not a Christian, their spirit is dormant, and God does not speak to them or work to them because he only works through the spirit that is within the individual. And Jesus said, you must be born again. What does that mean? You must be born again of the Spirit, Jesus said. And so what happens is the Spirit is reborn. When the Spirit is reborn, then we have contact with God and we can know God.
You and I have to take our break. Bill, please stand by. Exonation, our guest this hour, Dr. William L. Wagner. Fascinating gentleman. Thanks so much. I enjoy you.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
Good help is hard to find. My producer apologizes, Bill, for cutting us off those last couple of seconds of the last segment. So, I don't know. I'll have to have a nice talk with him later on. Dr. William L. Wagner is our guest. WilliamLWagner.com is the website. Bill, are there angels and are there demons?
Yeah, I think there really are. And that's one of the things of that 2%, Rob. You know, it talks about angels, and it talks about demons, and it talks about a spiritual world, and that's the second heaven. The first heaven is our stratosphere. The third heaven is the presence of God. And the second heaven is the abode of angels and demons and where they live. Now, God just simply has not explained this second heaven to us. The only one that I can think of is where you have this story where Daniel prayed, and it said that the angel wanted to come down. He heard the prayer, but he was stopped by the prince of Persia, and I think he was stopped by the prince of Persia in this second heaven where it existed. But I think that there are demons, and I think there are angels, and I think that they are very predominant in our world today. But God says, I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going to let you say that they do exist, but he did not go and explain them to us.
In your opinion, Bill, why was the Middle East chosen to be the Holy Land and not, let's say, Canada or the United States, Russia, Great Britain? Why the Middle East?
Rob, I would have to come along and say, I don't know the mind of God in that particular area. I do know that Ur of the Chaldeans, where most people think the Garden of Eden existed, was the birthplace of civilization. And you have your Fertile Crescent, and then the Fertile Crescent is Israel. And so I would say it has to do with the sheer fact of the geography and the relationship of the creation of man at that particular point. But I have no reason to know why it was that he did choose Jerusalem, but he did.
If God created us in his image, and I'm talking about the Trinity here, how come we all don't look alike? How come we don't all believe in the same thing?
Well, because we sinned, and because we lost our contact with God. Because remember, before they sinned, man was walking with God in the garden. And after they sinned, there was a separation between God and between man. And man said, we're going to go our own way. And so they've gone their own way. And
Oh, okay. If God is our father, okay, I'm a dad. I'm sure you're a dad and a granddad. We've got 6 children. We've got 15 grandchildren. We've got 1 great grandchild. If any one of my children or family was to do something wrong, I would not just wipe my hands clean of the entire family. I wouldn't even wipe my hands clean of this one person who did something wrong. As a parent, as a father, it is my responsibility to put them on the right path, to help them learn the lesson. So why would God, who was our creator, when the sin was done, not try to reason, but instead of casting the entire thing away, why wouldn't he just, like you and I would do, reason, find out, teach through examples?
well, he sent prophets and priests, and remember they have the story of the wealthy man and Lazarus. And the wealthy man said, oh, let me go back to my people and tell them, repent, don't come to this place. It's a terrible place. And the answer was given to him, no, they've got the prophets. They've got the books. They can know, but they have rejected it. So I believe that anybody that really wants to know the truth can find it through Jesus Christ. But there's another example, Rob, very quickly.
Okay, sure.
Jesus said, as the serpent was lifted up in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. And so the people sinned, and that's where we are now. You're talking about sin. The people sinned. And then God sent serpents among them, and the serpents bit them, and they died. And so they came to Moses and said, Moses, pray to God that they'll take the serpents away. So Moses went to God, and God said, no, I'm not going to take the serpents away, but I want you to make a serpent of brass and put it up in the community. And if anybody is bitten, if they will look and believe, they will be saved. And so it's the same way here now. There is death and there is destruction, and that comes from Satan all in the world. And so God has not taken away this death and destruction, but he's given us a way out, and that's Jesus who must be lifted up.
Okay, that sounds like the example of during the time when Moses was in Egypt and the Pharaoh would not let Moses and his people go. The angel of death came one night, and wherever there wasn't a cross or a sheep's blood on the door to signify that there was a Jewish family in there, the children in the other homes were killed, right?
Right.
So he did this in the Old Testament, and he's done it in the New Testament.
I think he still has allowed us as human beings. He created us in his image, but we as human beings have gone against him. And even today, we're going against him and saying we're going to go our own way. And the consequence of that is the wages of sin is death, says the Bible. And so because we are the ones that have sinned, we can't blame God for that, but we have to blame ourselves.
And I've got to take my final break. Please stand by. Exonation, Dr. William L. Wagner is my special guest. His website is williamlwagner.com. We'll both be back as we wrap up this edition of the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, and our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. Hey, and speaking about Christians, speaking about Jesus, we have the X Zone Christmas Mall that will be opening up October the 25th. Very simple website, xzonexmas.com. We'll be back. Don't go away.
NASA has confirmed that they have evidence of life beyond Earth.
This discovery is confirmed.
Well, let's see, we've had visitors again. Yeah. Anything worth mentioning?
I filmed 16 minutes on March 5th, 1994, 16 minutes of broad daylight UFO activity.
The other side, the spirit realm, is a parallel dimension which runs, which coexists with ours. And what spirits are doing is they're sending waves of frequency from that dimension to ours.
The government instituted the truth embargo. The government poured disinformation and misinformation into this field, encouraging hoaxes and any other foolishness. It created a truth vacuum that naturally was going to be filled with theories and assertions and other stuff.
The oil oligarchs and the banks and the people who are making decisions that are leading us down the wrong path.
They've undermined the research, intimidated and threatened witnesses. The government is responsible for the fact that the status of this issue is not resolved.
I'm Rob McConnell, host and executive producer of the X Zone radio show. Now we are set to bring the amazing world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology to broadcast TV and online video with the development of X Zone TV. X Zone TV will now bring our loyal listeners and new viewers face to face with the most controversial and well-known personalities in the field of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology. From scientists to theorists, astronauts to adventurers, celebrities, pundits, advocates, and naysayers, they'll all join our rapid-fire TV broadcast, interactive discussion, and debate. Interest in the paranormal and parapsychology has never been more intense, and it continues to grow. The truth is out there, so take a deep breath and join us as we step into the light. For more information about X Zone TV, please contact me, Rob McConnell, directly at these coordinates, Rob McConnell at xzonetv.com. And welcome back, one and all. This is the X Zone. I'm Rob McConnell. My guest is Dr. William L. Wagner, www.williamlwagner.com. First of all, Bill, always a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you ever so much for taking time out of your day to join us here on the X Zone. A couple of questions before we go. We've got about, Craig, my producer says about 5 minutes. In your opinion, my friend, what happens when we die?
That's very interesting. I have a different theory, and again, it's approximately 2%. I believe that when we die, we go to a place, for the Christians, we go to paradise, which is a holding place. And I think that the sinners go to a place called Hades, which in the Greek means the place of the dead. And I believe that we are there until the time of the resurrection. And when the resurrection comes, we are resurrected. Then we are either resurrected to one judgment, or we are resurrected to what they call the millennium, where we will reign with Christ for 1,000 years upon this earth. That's another whole story, what's going to happen in the future. But I believe very definitely that you don't go directly to heaven. Now, Martin Luther said there is what they call soul sleep, that your soul will sleep. And then the next thing you know, you wake up in the presence of God or in the presence of the resurrection. But I believe there is that phase before we go to the resurrection. At the resurrection, we go in to heaven, God's heaven, the third heaven, to be with him.
What about the people who aren't Christians? What happens to them?
Well, I believe the people that aren't Christians are not going to go to heaven. Now, the Muslims very strongly talk about hell. They describe hell in many, many various ways as terrible. They talk about the skin being cut off and everything. Whereas I believe that hell is nothing more than an existence without God. And that'd be C.S. Lewis said that hell is a small town in England without God. So
Bill, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's a great pleasure talking to you. And once again, Exonation, the website for our guest this hour, Dr. William L. Wagner, is www.williamlwagner.com. Take care of yourself, Bill.
Thank you, Rob.
Bye-bye. I'll be back on the other side of the news at 6.5 minutes. Well, let's try this one again. I'll be back on the other side of the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as we continue here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away.